Hello. How are we doing? How are we feeling? Oh, let me just bump up the volume a touch. There we go. Beautiful. We are back. The Hungaroring. Top 3 for me. Top 3 Grand Prix of the season. Top 3 circuits, I should say. Not always the best Grand Prix of the year, but certainly up there in terms of the circuits for me. I think maybe just because I've been there. I think has a little bit of a leeway on that. Oh, I forgot to plug this light in. Give me a second. Oh, God. I can't get it in. There we go. How are we doing? Hello, Sally's in the chat. Hello, Nathan as well. Aquil. I hope that is how you say it. How are we doing? As I say, Hungary. Plug this light and eat arm all over the place. There we go. None of the lights were plugged in, is effectively what you just saw there. But there we are. Will Ferrari be good this weekend? Yes and no. I think it's going to be still fairly one-sided right at the top end of the grid. But we'll get into that momentarily. Hello, Josh. Hello, Kelly. Hello, haircut. Yes, indeed. Little trim. Didn't actually do it this morning, though, so it looks a bit all over the place, but we'll take it. It'll be fine. Hello from Australia. Ooh. Carlos is out in Q1. I'm never staying up for qualifying again. Considering Alex Albon said that this might be one of those kind of bogey tracks for Williams, I wouldn't hold out a load of hope that Albon or Sainz is going to make it ridiculously far through. But you never know. Maybe once they've kind of got there. Found a barber, I did. Is Lewis making a comeback? Hey, Lewis has an exceptional record here in Hungary. Doesn't he have like the most wins, the most pole positions, the fastest lap ever, the fastest race ever? Like, he has an absolute brilliant record here at the Hungaroring. So if there's going to be a weekend where Lewis maybe nabs his first Grand Prix podium of the season, I know that we talked about that at Silverstone. It was like, you know, Silverstone is basically Lewis Hamilton's track, so it would make sense for him to get a podium there. He was just off of it, a 4th place finish rather than a 3rd. Maybe the Hungaroring is the start of the return of Lewis Hamilton to the podium once again. It's been a little while since we've seen him up there. Be certainly nice to see him up there for Ferrari, considering how the season has gone so far, and the fact that Fred Vasseur now has an additional contract as well. So we know that Fred Vasseur is going to be staying with Lewis Hamilton. I think Hamilton would have been quite a big part of that as well. I imagine Hamilton had a bit of a say on whether Fred Vasseur was to stay or to go. But he is going to be staying. What time does it kick off? We're about half an hour away. We usually come up 26 minutes away. There you go. From the beginning of qualifying itself. But should we delve into a few of those bits and pieces and delve into actually what we're going to see in front of us today? We are at the Hungaroring. As I say, probably top 3 circuits for me. Obviously, Singapore is right up there in terms of my just favorite Grand Prix of the year. I think it just delivers a different spectacle. And I just remember being a kid and watching the Singapore Grand Prix and just being mesmerized by it. But certainly Hungary is up there. Like, Hungary is, I want to say, sort of 2nd or 3rd. Canada for me, I also really love. Brazil, you can't really hate. Like, it always delivers an exceptional race. But Hungary is up there. I know that Hungary sort of had a bit of a reputation of being the Monaco of Hungary. There wasn't a lot of overtaking that used to happen at the Hungarian Grand Prix, but more so in the last few years. We've had a few spicy Hungarian Grand Prix, and it was particularly spicy last year, if you are a McLaren fan, and we'll delve into that in a moment. But 2 DRS zones set up quite nicely, I think, this year's Hungarian Grand Prix, because a few of the teams are getting used to their cars, but also really in need of a summer break. Obviously, the last Grand Prix before we do have 3 weekends in a row without a Grand Prix, but we will be back, don't worry, for what is the next one up? The Netherlands Grand Prix, and then Monza straight away. So back-to-back Netherlands and Monza after that summer break. But Hungary is one of the most underrated tracks on the calendar. Exactly, Josh. Completely agree. And I absolutely love the Hungarian Grand Prix circuit. It's one of my favorites to drive as well when it, comes to the Formula One game. Not saying that I get out to Hungary very often, but when I do drive the circuits in the game, I do think that the Hungarian Grand Prix is a little bit underrated. It's one of the better ones. Oh, I do love Austria, though. I just love a lot of the circuits. I love a lot of Formula One. But Hungary is certainly up there, and I'm looking forward to this weekend because I do think it is going to be quite juicy. In terms of looking how the weekend is laid out, we don't have any fancy tyres or anything like that this weekend, just a C3, C4, C5, so no tyre skips or anything like we had in Spa last time out. I thought they might try that again, considering Hungary is pretty tough on the tyres, but also you can use those sort of softer compounds. The C3, C4, C5 are pretty soft compounds relative to the rest of the year in terms of what we use. But I thought maybe they might go for like a C2 hard and have that gap again between the hard and the medium. But they've decided against that. C3, C4, C5 for this weekend. And it's those front tyres that generally kind of live a little bit longer. You can see there on the graphic, the rear tyres do take a little bit of a beating. Hello. Lots of people coming into the chat. Bonjour, bonjour. Welcome in. Oh, Sally upgraded her membership. Thank you so much, Sally. Literally just seen that pop up. Massively appreciate that. Thank you so, so much. I mean, you know how much I appreciate your help on the channel anyway, but thank you so. But looking at the race, 70 laps to come tomorrow, 306.63 kilometers. And as I say, it's one of those ones that, depending on how the asphalt is feeling and specifically the temperatures, it can be pretty tough on the tyres, or we could end up with a similar kind of thing to what we saw in Spa, where everybody just nurses their tyres throughout the entire Grand Prix and comes home fairly comfortably. I hope that's not the case, but we will have to wait and see. In terms of predictions, obviously get your predictions in before tomorrow. I've seen a couple of people asking for predictions in the chat. In terms of the race, we do the race predictions just before the Grand Prix tomorrow. You can still get your votes in if you head over to the community tab and you go over to, I think I put it out on Monday on the community tab. There's a link where you can get your predictions in. I think we had just over a few hundred people already get their predictions in. But if you want to get yours in as well and have your vote and have your say, certainly go and do that. And we'll go through the full race predictions for tomorrow. In terms of qualifying, I think it would be silly to look anywhere else but the two McLaren men. We're looking at the Drivers' Championship right now. Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris absolutely running away with it, both over 250 points now, 266 for Oscar Piastri, 250 for Lando Norris, and it's looking like a McLaren clean sweep once again. They were a lot quicker than the rest of the field when it came to free practice 1, 2, and 3. And it's going to be a straight fight between Piastri and Norris. Are we finally going to see a little bit of actual on-track action? If you didn't catch free practice, there was almost a coming together of the two McLaren cars. Oscar Piastri going down the pit straight, Lando Norris coming out of the pits into turn 1. Lando Norris locked up, trying to go up the inside of his teammate, and the two McLarens very nearly touched during free practice. So maybe this weekend it would be quite fulfilling and it would feel quite written, I guess, if we did end up seeing the first real tangle of those two. Because as much as it's been Piastri versus Norris for the championship so far this season, we haven't really seen them fight on track all that much. You could go maybe Canada, you could argue. We saw them have a little battle, but even then Lando Norris then just slammed into the back of Oscar Piastri, and that battle was kind of over and done with before it really started to heat up. And then in the last few races, it's just been tactical, hasn't it? Because of the weather conditions and because of how the races have played out, it's just been tactical battles between the two. Like last time out in Spa, we never really got to see them go side by side and really fight one another during the Grand Prix. I think coming back to the Hungaroring, of course, where we had the huge controversy between the two McLaren cars last year. Oscar Piastri getting his first win in Formula One, but some people may be saying that win wasn't overly justified considering how quick Lando Norris was in comparison to his teammate. Was then told to give that position back due to how the pit stops played out, and there was a lot of back and forth there, wasn't there, between those two? So it would be nice if we come full circle a year later. They are now both championship rivals, and we get to see a real battle between them for the first time this season for a victory. Like, it just feels like that is where we should be. 16 points the gap, so it does feel, unfortunately, like, well, fortunately and unfortunately, fortunately, if you're a McLaren fan, that for the rest of the season, the two McLaren cars will likely be 1-2. Unfortunate for Lando Norris, because that means even if he has an absolutely brilliant race and wins the Grand Prix by a mile, it's likely that Oscar Piastri will still finish in second. So Oscar Piastri will then only lose 7 points to Lando Norris and still be leading the championship. And he's got at least 2 7-point margins in the bank. You know, if he wins in the Hungaroring here and Lando Norris comes in second behind him, there's 10 races. And in 3 of those, Lando Norris has got to get the better of Oscar Piastri. And you look at how far it's gone this season. This is such an important Grand Prix for Lando Norris to win, because closing that gap from 16 down to 9 rather than elongating that gap from 16 up to 23 is a huge thing for Lando Norris. Not quite a win, obviously. You know, that 25-point margin is the one we always look for. But 23 points, considering they're likely to just finish first and second for the rest of the season, the last 11 Grand Prix that we've got, I think that gets very interesting. Max Verstappen then behind in 185 points, third place in the championship, and having an absolutely horror show weekend so far, it has to be said. The Red Bull car is all over the place, possibly not even looking the 4th fastest car right now during some of those free practice sessions that we have seen. Lots of work to do for Max Verstappen going into qualifying, but we often say that about Max Verstappen, and we sometimes say that about the Red Bull team, and then he just sort of turns up. So I'll only believe it when I see Max Verstappen drop out in a Q2 session that it's actually all gone that badly for him. You know what I mean? Like, he always seems to find a way to find the pace when he then gets into those qualifying sessions. And George Russell, 157 points behind, of course, beyond that 25-point gap, which now means Max Verstappen is confirmed to be staying at Red Bull next year. For those of you that don't know, the reason that has only just been confirmed by Max Verstappen now, and it feels like, you know, Max Verstappen maybe wanted to get it done before the summer break, yes, but also there was a clause, or an apparent clause, of course we never get to see the drivers' contracts really, but an apparent clause that was going up and down the grid, that Max Verstappen, if he was lower than 3rd in the championship going into the summer break, so at some point during August would have been when that date was set, if Max Verstappen was 4 lower in the championship, then he would have had a break clause with Red Bull that would have allowed him to move out of that Red Bull contract without, you know, having any penalty. Of course, he could just buy himself out of that contract. He's a very rich man. I'm sure he would be able to negotiate his way out of a contract if he really wanted to. But that break clause is no longer in play because Max Verstappen guaranteed to be in 3rd place in the championship. Although George Russell looking pretty good this weekend. You know, we saw the Mercedes car last year do pretty well around the Hungaroring. And I think they need a boost. You know, George Russell's been talking about the negativity behind the scenes really at Mercedes in recent weekends, and the fact that it does feel like that car has fallen away, because we were used to seeing George Russell on the podium, you know, even winning the Canadian Grand Prix. Kimi Antonelli was on the podium that weekend as well. But just since then, it's been a real tough slog for the Mercedes cars. They always feel like they're in complete no man's land. Like last time around, I don't think we saw any of George Russell on the broadcast because he was just all on his own for the entirety of the Belgian Grand Prix. So it would be nice to see George Russell get another good performance under his belt, because he's actually performed incredibly well throughout this season so far and has maybe gone a little bit under the radar just because that Mercedes car has not been able to deliver the performances in the last few races. And as he said, has definitely taken a step backwards since, from where they were at the beginning of the season to now. Then we move into the Ferraris, seeing a lot of positivity around Lewis Hamilton. Again, has a really, really good record around here in Hungary. So maybe one last race before the summer break. I think a summer break that will be really good for Lewis Hamilton, actually. We talk about a lot of the drivers. If you're an Oscar Piastri or a Lando Norris, you probably don't want the summer break. You want to continue this momentum. You maybe want to sort of keep running as you're going through and keeping yourself as fresh as possible, because we know that sometimes drivers after the summer break can take a little while to get back into it, or maybe come back swinging, when they've had that break. So it's one of those things where some drivers really want the summer break, some drivers don't. I think Lewis Hamilton will probably want the summer break. It's been quite a lot to learn at Ferrari at the beginning of the season. Not everything has gone perfectly for him. And he's had a lot of weekends where he really has struggled inside of that Scuderia setup. So I think a good summer break for Lewis Hamilton, maybe a nice performance at the Hungaroring, somewhere where he does go well, would be a nice way to sort of round out the first half of his first season in red. More races to come for Lewis, hopefully more success to come for Lewis in Ferrari. But for now, he can kind of put those first 14 races behind him and start to look towards the future instead. Kimi Antonelli is the driver I think most needs the summer break. It just feels like everything around him is starting to fall apart. Even though, as George Russell quite rightly pointed out, he has actually been getting closer to George Russell in terms of qualifying pace and generally looks more comfortable inside of that Mercedes car, because the Mercedes car has just fallen away. It's sort of knocked Kimi Antonelli's confidence a little bit. He doesn't feel quite himself inside of the car. And actually, I think Kimi Antonelli, if he gets into the summer break, just has a couple of weekends off, bit of a reset, and it's really tough for these drivers, especially the rookies, and especially someone like Kimi Antonelli, who's been thrown straight into a really competitive seat at such a young age. We've had 14 races in 18, 19 weeks, something like that. There has been not a lot of gaps between the Grand Prix this year, and I think for those rookies, it is starting to take its toll a little bit. I think Kimi Antonelli, one of those. Isaac Hadjar as well, hasn't really hit the heights in the last couple of Grand Prix. I know that the difficulties with his strategy last time out in Spa, more so than anything else, because he was still quick in qualifying, but then come the race, he didn't really have the pace to do anything exceptional from that point onwards. So kind of feels like those drivers are hitting a wall a little bit in terms of where they are, need those 3 weeks off, and then they can come back into the second half of the year. And, Netherlands and then Monza is actually quite a good combination to get you back into the swing of things, because it's two still European tracks. The time difference isn't crazy, especially for those drivers that are staying in and around Italy, Monaco, Spain. You can sort of judge yourself, get into a bit of a routine, and then come back for 2 European Grand Prix. And then Azerbaijan afterwards. Yeah, Singapore in October is the first one where we're in a different time zone, and a dramatically different time zone. So I think a lot of those drivers will need it because of that. Albon, Hulkenberg, Ocon, we kind of skipped over there in the midfield, but just continue to do exceptional work, don't they? Albon in particular has just been sublime over the first half of the year. Hulkenberg the same in the last 5 races, has been pretty much perfect. He's had a couple of incidents here and there, but generally speaking has delivered when he's needed to. His qualifying pace has maybe fallen off a touch. We're seeing Gabriel Bortoleto has now out-qualified Nico Hulkenberg more so than his teammate. So maybe just not quite that one-lap pace for Nico Hulkenberg, but when it does come to the Grand Prix itself, Hulkenberg delivers, doesn't he? And then Esteban Ocon, also doing a really good, if underrated, job inside of that Haas car, I think. We did the 2025 mid-season driver rankings. If you haven't seen that video, it's linked in the description down below. Maybe just open that video up, play it in the background, help the guy out, play that, watch it all the way through. But it was, for For Ocon, I think underrated just because that Haas car is not quite swinging. And the Haas is a weird one, isn't it? It's never the slowest car. It's never the quickest car. It's just kind of in that weird midfieldy nothingness. I look like a mixture of Max Foch and Oscar Piastri. I'll take that as a compliment. I think the Max Foch thing comes just because I also wear glasses. But you never know. We are from the same country. Gasly and Stroll on 20 points apiece, 16 points apiece for Lawson, Alonso and Sainz. Tsunoda still down there on 10 points. Really awkward weekend for Yuki Tsunoda in Spa. And now coming into a weekend where the Red Bull car looks absolutely awful. Although Yuki Tsunoda has finished above Max Verstappen for the first time in a free practice session. So, free practice. Definitely maybe a positive that we can take for Yuki Tsunoda. Certainly last weekend's qualifying was a huge positive for Yuki Tsunoda. So I think more points to come. 6 points, though, needed to catch up to Lawson, Alonso and Sainz is quite a big ask. Behrman and Bortoletto on 8 points and 6 points each. Colapinto and Doohan, the two drivers, yet to score points. And again, we're sort of looking at Colapinto. Jack Doohan is here this weekend, I think, for Alpine. Who will be in that car after the summer break? I feel like Colapinto will be, but maybe they change their minds. Maybe they go back to Jack Doohan. Maybe they try something a little bit different. Let's just quickly load up a couple of things in the background. We'll also pop the Constructors' Championship up for those guys on the main string. Piastri 2025 World Champion. Lewis predictions. I feel like a Lewis podium is certainly achievable this weekend, particularly if Red Bull continue to have their problems. I think the problem is Mercedes might be able to sneak in there. It's that third place, isn't it? The top two are guaranteed, unless, of course, Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris do come to blows and take one another out, which definitely could happen this weekend. I feel like they're going to be on similar pieces of tarmac throughout the entire weekend, really. But if I was looking at it from Lewis Hamilton's perspective, I'd say third place is certainly up for grabs. Maybe fourth place if George Russell kind of follows the pattern of performances that we've seen from him over the year so far. But then on the flip side, the Mercedes car has not been amazing for them over the course of the last few Grand Prix weekends. So certainly a podium is up for grabs for Lewis Hamilton. Got to beat his teammate to it. But that's sort of where my Lewis Hamilton head would be at going into this weekend. I think Ferrari, you just look at the fact that they're second in the Constructors' Championship. Has been a little bit of a race to the bottom, really, hasn't it? Between second, third and fourth place in the Constructors' Championship this year. But just goes to show that having two really reliable drivers, even if your car hasn't necessarily been the best. Like, I don't think the Ferrari car has been better than the Mercedes or the Red Bull car for the majority of these 14 races or 13 races that we've had so far. But having two drivers that consistently put in the performances you need to get those points does get you that 28-point gap that Ferrari have now got, because Kimi Antonelli's had off races. Yuki Tsunoda's really struggled since going into that Red Bull. If Red Bull had two drivers or two Max Verstappens, they'd be comfortably second in the championship. If Mercedes had two George Russells, they'd also likely be second in the championship. Like, Ferrari are benefiting from the fact that Antonelli and Tsunoda have not really delivered on the level that their teammates have over the course of the year. I mean, you can look at the driver's standings and see that. I'm sort of not telling you to suck eggs or anything like that, but I think that just goes to show why Ferrari have got the lineup that they have, and why Ferrari are so confident about being able to continue to get that second place in the Constructors. And at least stand still. They were second in the Constructors last year, second in the Constructors this year. It's a very different second place, isn't it? They were very, very close. Lewis will outperform both Mackies and Leclerc to get the podium. Yeah, that's what I mean. I think the Mercedes, well, I think he'll outperform Antonelli. Antonelli has not had the best sort of last 5 or 6 races, so that's certainly open for Lewis there. it's George Russell and Charles Leclerc are the big ones to keep an eye on, especially, well, and Max Verstappen, because we never know. That Red Bull might just click just as Red Bull need it to as we go into the actual competitive part of the weekend, despite having a pretty horrid Friday and this morning, really. Hello, how am I? I'm very good. Welcome all the new subs. Thank you, Sally. Appreciate that. But we are going to go into qualifying now. Somehow that half an hour has disappeared. Did I show this? Maybe. Quick reminder. C3, C4, C5 tyres this weekend. Obviously, the C5 mostly at play during these qualifying sessions, but no jump. So unlikely that we'll see anyone kind of go for like a weird strategy like we did last weekend in Spa. Also, there's no C6 tyre, because sometimes we've kind of seen the C6 come into play, and oftentimes then people qualify on the C5, which is the medium, and feel like they are more suited to that, but there's no C6 at play either. So likely to just see the soft compound tyre at play during this qualifying session. But let's move into qualifying itself and just make sure everything is loaded. Live timings set up. Need a little bit of a replay. I'm going to put my headphone in so I can hear the commentary. Hello, Antonia. How are we doing? Did you shift to your new home? This is it. Yeah, the new home has happened. Oscar first, Orlando. That is a question for a few sessions time. They got to get there first and foremost. Going into Q1, we are going to lose 5 drivers from the bottom of the grid. 20 drivers go in. 15 drivers make their way through to Q2. 18 minutes on the clock here in Hungary. Who are your 5 drivers you're expecting to drop out then? You know, who are we thinking might not have the pace to get through to Q2? Is it going to be... There's not been like a huge plethora of obvious choices for the drivers to drop out in Q1, has there? It's often been very, very tight indeed when it's come to getting through Q1 in qualifying. Of course, the big scares or the big shocks last time out were Lewis Hamilton and Kimi Antonelli both falling away from it. Carlos Sainz also finding himself in a difficult situation last time around. But now we're in Hungary. Who are we expecting? Why do I sound like Max Fosh? I don't know. We're from the same country. Do I think Piastri will get pole after getting fastest lap in FP3? I think it's going to be super tight. The problem is, Lando Norris, this is one of those tracks where he is pretty swift, you know. I always think when I visualize kind of Lando Norris and him doing well at a circuit, it is Austria. Always does well in Austria, does Lando Norris. I know that's where he got his first podium and things like that, but he does always go quick. And we saw in the Austrian Grand Prix this year that he just absolutely dominated it. And won it fairly comfortably, even from his teammate. So Hungary does feel like another one of those circuits which usually Lando does go pretty well at. So I would be looking at Lando doing a pretty good job. But you then have that argument of the fact that Piastri is leading the championship. Piastri has done a very well indeed throughout this season so far. Stroll, Gasly, Behrman, Albon, Sainz. That is a confident 5 you've gone for there. Gasly in there and no Colapinto. That would be a big surprise if Gasly is out-qualified by Colapinto and Colapinto manages to get through to Q2. But I do indeed like the prediction that you've gone for. Both of the Williams cars down there is damning, isn't it? Behrman, Sainz, Lawson, Colapinto and Bortoletto. Okay, yeah. Colapinto in there, I can understand. Lawson feels a little bit harsh. Bortoletto has also done really well in qualifying recently, but I suppose that's the thing. 5 drivers have got to go, haven't they? And it is always going to be very tight indeed. We are about 30 seconds away from the start of qualifying here in Hungary, the Hungaroring. Franco, Hulk, Stroll, Esteban, and Tsunoda. Oof, he's thrown in a Yuki Tsunoda into the mix. To be fair, Yuki Tsunoda unfortunately has dropped out of Q1 a couple of times this year. Still no driver radio transcriptions. So we are waiting for drivers to get into the cars. A lot of them only just now getting to their seats and popping their gloves on. But we have got the green light at the end of the pit lane. And now we wait. Who blinks first then? Which driver is going to be out on track for us to have a look at during qualifying? Nobody wants to come out yet. Everybody is decided. I'm just going to wait a moment. Just going to wait a little bit. Colapinto, Bortoletto, Ocon, Albon, Behrman. Ooh. Do I think Gasly deserves a spot in a top team? Well, that was supposed to be what this was for him, right? He finally got out of the Red Bull stable, managed to get into an Alpine seat, and then make the Alpine team his own by displacing Esteban Ocon and now becoming the clear number one within the team. But unfortunately, just it's Alpine, and as much as he's the number one, he's certainly the main man there. It's a little bit like when Daniel Ricciardo, I guess, was the main man at Renault, and we were like, okay, it's time for them to kick on now that they've got a driver of this caliber, and just still wasn't able to quite deliver. It's been like that again for Pierre Gasly, isn't it? We haven't quite seen an Alpine car which has been able to really fight for anything yet. And that's why he's have a bit of a tough season. 20 points on the board, though, for Pierre is a very solid return, considering certainly feels like that Alpine car is the slowest amongst the grid the majority of the weekends. Both of the Williams cars out nice and early for us, though. Carlos Sainz just coming around the second sector and Alex Albon behind him. So the two Williams cars deciding to do everybody else a favour and get out there and sweep some of the dust off the circuit. So a lot of the time, why drivers don't want to be out there first and foremost, as sometimes you do have a little bit of debris and dust on the racing line, which as soon as a couple of cars have gone past, gets swept away by the ground effect vortexes that we have underneath these cars. Of course, less ground effect for 2026, but still with the blown diffusers that these cars have, they do shift quite a lot of the debris. Here we are then. It's a lot of mixed feelings. Colapinto, Stroll, Hulkenberg, Behrman, Alonso, both of the Aston Martins down there. Oof. And a little bit of a lock-up for Carlos Sainz going down into turn one, and that's going to be almost a pointless lap for Carlos Sainz now. Big lock-up down into turn one. It is slightly downhill as they go into turn one, and you've seen a few times in free practice just carrying a little bit too much speed. It's very easy to lock the front left in particular when you're going down towards turn one, but Carlos Sainz already has. Alex Albon then his teammate behind. Let's compare their sectors. And there you go, 0.6 of a second slower, Carlos Sainz, through that first part of the lap. So that is the lock-up effect, unfortunately, for Carlos Sainz. And he's lost a bit of lap time because of it. Max Verstappen and Yuki Tsunoda coming out together behind. Lando Norris and Piastri also. It's 2x2 as we go down into the pit lane at the moment. I'm sure the chaos will begin as the cars start to try and shuffle themselves into position. Esteban Ocon, the first driver to break the 2x2. It's Ocon, Hamilton, Behrman coming out of the pits now. Alex Albon also quicker than his teammate through the second part of the lap by 0.3 of a second, and feels like this lap is a little bit of a no-go for Carlos Sainz, really. A 1 minute 18.2 is then absolutely obliterated by Alex Albon with a 1:17.4. So Carlos Sainz certainly going to need to go again. Just a big lock-up for Carlos Sainz down towards turn one. It was the front right tyre for Carlos Sainz that he locked up as well. Verstappen and Tsunoda are going to be the next drivers to set flying laps. So Verstappen going fairly early, you could argue, yeah. Maybe just wanting a little bit more time out on track. It means you've got clean air at least on your outlap. It then just means you're going to run into quite a lot of traffic on your actual flying lap, as we now see Max Verstappen start that. So let's see what Verstappen has got as he goes past Charles Leclerc coming out of the pits and through into turn 1. DRS between turn 1 and turn 2 as well this year. And then round turn 2 he comes. Keep an eye on Max Verstappen's time as he's going to come through turn 3 down this main, or this little back straight towards turn 4. And he's nearly 4 tenths quicker than Alex Albon already. But I want to compare Tsunoda to Verstappen here, see what the balance is like. So Tsunoda a 1/10 of a second slower than Verstappen through the first sector. Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri also on their flying laps. Let's keep an eye on their first sector times. Lando curring to the end of his first sector now. So 27.8, which is a 1/10 and a bit slower than Max Verstappen. Verstappen completes his second stint, or second phase, sorry. And the sector is purple for Max Verstappen. Tricky final part of the lap for Verstappen. I always find really turn 13 into 14, I always find really hard. They're kind of two looping corners where you have to carry just enough momentum, but also get it spot on. Lando Norris has just gone quickest of anybody through the middle part of the lap. Oscar Piastri, his teammate, quicker in the first sector. Lando Norris coming through that twisty 13 and 14 that I was just talking about, as Oscar Piastri then goes quicker than his teammate through the second part of the lap as well. So Piastri purple in both sectors. Lando Norris goes to the top of the timing sheets for now with a 1:15.9, the first driver into the 1:15s, but it feels like Piastri has got that little bit more pace in this first stint. He does indeed. 3.5 tenths quicker and a 15.5 from Oscar Piastri. Both of the McLarens looking very slick indeed, and probably comfortably through already, looking at the respective times from everybody else. Verstappen a 16.3, Tsunoda a 16.5, Ocon has slotted in front of the two Williams cars. Here comes Esteban Ocon, Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton's time, third fastest. Ollie Behrman is who I was looking at. Comes across the start-finish line to go sixth fastest and a couple attempts quicker than his teammate. Oh, and Oscar Piastri dips his tyres into the gravel at turn 12. So did Lewis Hamilton. There's a lot of gravel now out there on the outside of turn 12. Whether that'll be something that the stewards have to have a little look at, maybe send some marshals to sweep turn 12 between the two qualifying parts. Here comes Charles Leclerc, sixth fastest in his Ferrari so far. Then Charles Leclerc slots in behind both of the two Aston Martin cars. So Aston Martin doing incredibly well, as Isaac Hadjar then slots himself in between, almost into the 1:15s from Hadjar, a 1:16 dead from Isaac Hadjar. Kimi Antonelli has gone quickest of anybody through the first sector, a little bit slower through the second sector from the Mercedes car. But Antonelli showing some good raw pace, as George Russell also doing the same. Antonelli purple in the first sector, his teammate George Russell purple in the second sector. And this is what I mean, the Mercedes cars certainly look competitive this weekend. Here comes Kimi Antonelli to split the two McLaren cars. And George Russell here might be on for the quickest lap time, depending on how his final sector goes. No, not quite from George Russell. Yeah, that final sector, you can see, just a 1/10.5 slower than Oscar Piastri. And George Russell then slots into second place because of that. Less than a 1/10, though, between Piastri and Russell at this point. Kimi Antonelli, third fastest. Lando Norris, fourth fastest. Lewis Hamilton, fifth fastest. Here comes Nico Hülkenberg to go 11th overall. And then finally, Gabriel Bortoleto to go 12th. So it is Ollie Behrman, Pierre Gasly, Esteban Ocon, and both of the Williams cars down at the bottom of the standings for now. Carlos Sainz goes 15th fastest and displaces Yuki Tsunoda from that position. As Tsunoda drops down into the bottom 5. Here comes Alex Albon as well. Let's see what he can do in terms of improving his lap time. he goes 15th fastest and displaces his teammate. So Sainz back down into the bottom 5 with Tsunoda, Behrman, Gasly and Ocon, the 4 other drivers that desperately need to improve in the 7.5 minutes that we've got left here at the Hungaroring during Q1. Piastri, Russell, Antonelli, Norris feel like they are pretty solidly safe at this point. Lewis Hamilton then behind in 5th. The Mercedes car's looking even quicker than I was expecting them to be honest. I thought George Russell would be in and amongst it. The Ferraris may be able to knock on the door off them, but no, Russell and Antonelli both look very, very solid indeed. And Nico Hülkenberg also dipping a tyre into the gravel at turn 12. Turn 12's taking a real battering this time around, isn't it? It's a lot of gravel being thrown up throughout that final sector. What happened to Max Verstappen this season? I mean, it's less so what's happened to Verstappen and more the fact that the Red Bull car has been absolutely atrocious throughout this weekend so far. They were talking about how they have changed a few things on the Red Bull for this weekend, and they were experimenting throughout sort of free practice over the course of this weekend, and all of their experiments did not line up with what they were expecting. So all of the data that they've got from their car and all of the simulations they'll have done back at the factory are looking absolutely nowhere near where the actual car is performing out on track. And when you've got that kind of impossible maths problem that is, how come our simulator is telling us this, but then when we get it onto the actual track it does that, it's really difficult to then compare, and it's really difficult to know where you're going wrong and what's really happening. So that's what Verstappen is fighting with. It's happened a couple of times this season, but Verstappen has been able to turn it on when qualifying has come through. It's looking pretty close for Max Verstappen. He's 13th fastest at the moment. Hadjar finds himself as the fastest Red Bull powered car, because Verstappen, Lawson and Tsunoda, you would say, all right in that mix for falling away. Lance Stroll and Fernando Alonso deciding they want to get their fast laps done before the rest of the field. Hello, Sarah. Just in time indeed. Just about to see 5 drivers drop out of this first qualifying session. Do I think Antonelli will finish ahead of George in today's session? If I was going to gamble on it, I'd say no, just because George Russell has out-qualified Kimi Antonelli more often than not. But certainly, if Kimi Antonelli has found a little bit of pace and feels a little bit more comfortable inside of that Mercedes themselves talked about how they were kind of experimenting this weekend a little bit and changing a few things almost back to what they had at the beginning of the season, because George Russell has been fairly critical of the Mercedes team of late and the fact that they seem to have just gone down a slightly different direction or not quite lined up this this part of the year with how they were expecting it to go, considering how well the year started for them. So bit of a reset needed at Mercedes, as Lance Stroll just goes quickest of anybody through the first sector. You can see that on the timing sheets there. That purple ring around Lance Stroll's first sector time means it is quickest of anybody throughout the session so far. Here comes Fernando Alonso to then go even quicker still. So the lap time is starting to come, and those tyres may be rubbering in a little here in qualifying. We're now going to see if they can deliver and which of those 5 drivers will be dropping out in this first qualifying session. Fernando Alonso, as I say, quickest of anybody through the first sector. Let's have a little look at this second sector from Fernando. It's also purple. Fernando Alonso, purple in sector 1, purple in sector 2, just around turn 12 and 13. The final sector, the shortest of the bunch. Here comes Fernando Alonso then. What can he do? Is he going to go to the top of the sheets ahead of Oscar Piastri? He is indeed by 2.5 tenths of a second. Oh. And, Esteban Ocon has got a screw stuck on his tyre. That hopefully will come off before he gets out on track. He's just making his way down the pit lane as Esteban Ocon. Can we see it? Feels like it will just roll off, right, if it's on there, but I can't see it. So we're waiting to see who left a screw just on the pit lane for somebody to pick up. Fernando Alonso, quickest of anybody so far. Verstappen just coming around 13th fastest at the moment, Max Verstappen. Let's see what his lap times are like. He's just coming down through turn 3 and up towards turn 4. He's a 10.5 down on Fernando Alonso's time, but has improved his first sector. Is at least a green first sector from Max Verstappen, as you would expect at this point in qualifying. Oscar Piastri has just gone quickest of anybody through the first and second sectors. So Piastri now looking to take back top spot from Fernando Alonso. And he does indeed go quickest, a 1:15.2. Though Fernando Alonso within a tenth of a second of Oscar Piastri's lap time there is a very, very quick lap indeed. Yuki Tsunoda is improving as well. He's 17th fastest at the moment, but improved in the first and second sectors. So is Isaac Hadjar. So the Red Bull powered cars starting to try and at least have a bit of a fight back. Here comes Max Verstappen, 6th fastest. That should be good enough from Max Verstappen. Yuki Tsunoda goes 8th fastest, and you would think that would also be just enough. Here comes Isaac Hadjar, though. Hadjar, 3rd fastest of anybody in that RB. Stunning from Isaac Hadjar once again. How much praise can we give to the Frenchman? He just continues to deliver. Here comes Bortoletto goes 5th fastest of anybody as well in the Stake Sauber car. Now, this is where it's going to start to get interesting because those backmarker teams are going much quicker than I was expecting them to. Carlos Sainz has just gone 7th quickest in a Williams. That is a huge improvement from them. And I'm looking at Lewis Hamilton and Yuki Tsunoda in 11th and 12th. Charles Leclerc is in 14th place. Could we lose one of the big boys here? Gasly goes P13. That is not going to be good enough from Pierre Gasly, surely, with Charles Leclerc behind him and improving. Franco Colapinto goes 11th fastest so far, though. It's going to be tight. Alex Albon is coming around the final corner. He's 18th fastest at the minute. Only goes 17th fastest, Alex Albon. So he is going to be out of this one. And that is disappointing for Alex Albon, it has to be said. Charles Leclerc has just gone quickest of anybody through the first part of the lap. So Charles Leclerc turning it on. Esteban Ocon has only gone 15th fastest. Here comes Ollie Behrman, his teammate, to go 10th fastest. Ollie Behrman, take a bow. That is a sublime lap from Ollie Behrman at this point in qualifying. Hamilton and Leclerc still to finish their laps, though. Charles Leclerc needs to make sure that he does not make any kind of error through this final corner. It's looking all good. Lewis Hamilton goes up to 9th. Charles Leclerc surely to then drop Pierre Gasly out of qualifying. Does indeed. Now this is the one. Can Liam Lawson get himself out of this bottom 5 and put Yuki Tsunoda in it? He can! Yuki Tsunoda is bumped by Liam Lawson and Tsunoda after a really, really solid qualifying from Tsunoda last time out in Spa. He is once again down in that bottom 5 for Red Bull, and Tsunoda will start from 16th place on the grid tomorrow. Gasly, Ocon, Hülkenberg and Albon, the other 5 drivers down there. And again, it's Ocon and Hülkenberg for me, and I don't know whether this is just because I remember it more than because of the impact it has, but it does feel like Ocon and Hülkenberg are outdone by Bortoletto and Behrman quite often when it comes to qualifying, particularly when they're dropped down in Q1. Like Hülkenberg has started from towards the back end of the grid quite a lot. compared to Gabriel Bortoleto. I know he has a massive advantage in terms of the points in the championship, but in terms of qualifying, Gabriel Bortoleto is really turning up the heat right now. And Ollie Behrman also doing a sublime job inside of that Haas car. Pierre Gasly also outdone by Franco Colapinto, which was not something that I expected. Somebody in the chat, I've completely forgotten who, said Gasly in their bottom 5, but not Colapinto. You absolutely can have a gold star, because I would never have predicted that Gasly was going to drop out and Colapinto would make it through, but that is the case that we have. Alex Albon has also been outdone by Carlos Sainz. That doesn't happen too often either. Albon has dropped down in 20th. Carlos Sainz made it through in 8th place. And Yuki Tsunoda also drops out in 16th with teammate Max Verstappen in 11th. So 5 different teams, obviously 5 different drivers down there at the bottom. But that was a stunning end to qualifying for a few of those cars. Yellow flag in that final sector as well. So they have sent a few of the stewards, not the stewards, a few of the marshals, sorry, to go out there and then sweep up that turn 12, because it was absolutely covered in gravel. Incident involving Antonelli and Russell will be investigated, failing to follow the race director's instructions on maximum delta time. That normally doesn't really have any repercussions. That will be either there was a bit of traffic in the way or something like that on their outlap, which just cost them a bit of time. Interested that is also just both of the Mercedes cars. Oh, and the start of Q2 will be delayed. So that is the yellow flag, and everybody now, there's a lot of marshals running out and sweeping up the gravel on the inside of turn 12 there. I mean, it makes sense that there's a gravel trap there, because otherwise you would just run incredibly wide through turn 12. So it does offer a bit of difficulty when it comes to that final sector. But it does also sometimes lead to this, where almost every single car dipped a tyre or two into the gravel on the outside of 12. And that then means that we do have to just have a bit of a sweep up between Q1 and Q2. Piastri quickest of the drivers then. Fernando Alonso and Isaac Hadjar on the podium places in terms of that first qualifying session. Here's an onboard with Isaac Hadjar. What happened inside of the RB? Just a little bit of impeding possibly. Couldn't actually see who that was in front of him, but Isaac Hadjar not very happy at all through that first sector. Yuki Tsunoda is making his way down the pit lane, 16th place, and outdone again by all 3 of the other Red Bull powered cars. Lawson, Hadjar, and Verstappen have all made their way through where Tsunoda could not. And only Piastri and Lando Norris on used soft compound tyres there at the end. So the majority of teams using up 2 sets of soft compound tyres trying to make their way through in Q1, which I think just goes to show how competitive Q1 is at this point in the season. At this point in Formula One, it was, only a few years ago where we often saw the top 3 or 4 teams go out on used rubber at the end of Q1, because it was almost guaranteed that, the 2 Hasses would be out, with Mick Schumacher and Nikita Mazepin, and Latifi would always be in that bottom 5. And there was drivers that you could almost guarantee would be out. So you didn't have to gamble on those tyres too much, but it goes to show, Alonso, Hadjar, Leclerc, Bortoleto, Russell, all the way down through the field, they all went on new tyres towards the end of that session as well. So it's going to be very, very close indeed in the second part of qualifying still. And now just, we're looking at the drivers that are most likely to get in there. I think Piastri and Norris, obviously, will definitely be in that top 10. I'd be very surprised if Leclerc, Russell, and Hamilton weren't. So that's sort of 5 out of the 10 already locked in. But beyond that, is anybody else absolutely guaranteed? I'd say Max Verstappen, but Verstappen is having an absolute horror show of a weekend. So even if Verstappen's guaranteed, that's still 4 slots available inside of the top 10. 4 point scoring positions for tomorrow that are up for grabs. that could go to any of those drivers, from Alonso to Hadjar, Bortoleto, Sainz, Stroll. They're all in the mix when it comes to getting there. But who are going to be the 5 to drop out then? I think this is really difficult to judge who's going to fall out here. I'd say Colapinto is almost guaranteed to fall out. I don't think he's got the pace to get through into a Q3. But apart from that, I don't know. I really don't know. I think it is going to be a very interesting second qualifying. But we're just waiting for a little bit of the track debris. The track is now clear. So you can see that on your screens. The green flag at the bottom there. Just down here. And we can now see that the teams are going to get themselves set up about a minute away from the start of the second part of qualifying. Max might be in a bit of trouble. That's what I mean. I think Max is really sort of only an 11 fastest lap from him, and a fresh set of softs used for Max Verstappen as well. So 2 fresh sets of soft compound tires used for Max Verstappen. He might have to use another 2 just to get through into Q3, which is not often the case. You know, a lot of the time he's got rubber in hand, has Max Verstappen. Norris is going to get pole, and Piastri's going to steal the win from Lando again. Oof. That would be a very... I don't know if Lando's going to let Oscar Piastri pass that easily. I think it could be a bit of a bounce. 1 out of 5 in Q1. That's all right. No. You can do it this time around. Colapinto's at least a guaranteed another one. Bortoleto, Hadjar, Antonelli, Hamilton. Oof. Okay. Why do Russell and Antonelli have an investigation on them? They were pretty slow on their outlap. So basically, on your outlap, you have to do a certain time that is set by the race director, a maximum delta time, as they kind of put it here. They didn't follow that maximum delta time, but that happens almost every qualifying session, to be honest. It will usually be something to do with traffic or the way that they came out of the pits and things like that. So often we don't really see any kind of penalty for it. Having said that, Antonelli and Russell are first out of anybody. So Antonelli already making his way around turn 2. George Russell out behind him. Stroll and Alonso also deciding that they want to get out on track sooner rather than later. And already a big queue in the pits. Of course, only 15 minutes in this second qualifying session. So the cars wanting to get out as quickly as possible. And a big queue in the pit lane already. Oh. And Colapinto, not very happy at all. I think the Racing Bulls just sort of jutting in front of Franco in the pit lane there. Lawson and Hadjar squeezing their way into the order. And that's the benefit that you've got, I guess, of coming lower in the Constructors' Championship. You get to position your garage further down the pit lane. So for McLaren and Ferrari, they've got to travel quite a distance down the pit lane to get to the track. But your Stake Saubers, they just nip out of the garage straight into the front of the queue. Sort of bully their way into it. But here comes Kimi Antonelli then to start us with the fast laps in this second part of qualifying. Piastri on the radio. Patch of rain passing turn 1, turn 5. The track is pretty warm. It is 28.2 degrees in Hungary. So even if there is just a tiny little bit of rain, it won't affect them too much. But if there is a rain cloud coming, that could certainly put a spanner in the works, and maybe that is why Antonelli and Russell wanted to get out first. Antonelli sets a first sector time, which is then outdone by George Russell. So Russell a 27.7, just a few hundredths quicker than his teammate through that first part of the lap. And let's have a little look. Lance Stroll then goes a tenth of a second quicker than George Russell through the first sector. So Aston Martin looking competitive as Fernando Alonso then goes quickest of anybody through the first sector as well. The first sector times are starting to come. Max Verstappen being told the best conditions will be at the end of the session. So Verstappen and GP gambling on the fact that the rain won't be a real problem and that the track will continue to rubber in. So Verstappen now just looking to get a lap in that will settle his nerves a little. Verstappen going past the start-finish line as we then see Lance Stroll go 3.5 tenths quicker than George Russell. Kimi Antonelli must have made a little mistake through that middle sector, was particularly slow through there. And here comes Fernando Alonso, his teammate, to go even quicker still. Alonso finds nearly 3 tenths of a second on Lance Stroll, and Alonso up to the top of the timing sheets for now. Ollie Behrman and Carlos Sainz to come. Ollie Behrman, third fastest. Oh, Carlos Sainz is starting his flying lap. Apologies. So Bortoletto actually next across the start-finish line. He goes fifth fastest and splits the two Mercedes cars. There is quite a gap, though, I guess, between Russell and Antonelli to fill, as Lawson does also. He goes fifth fastest and a tenth of a second slower than George Russell in fourth spot. Here comes Isaac Hadjar, who again just is sublimely quick. Isaac Hadjar, what has he had for breakfast? Third fastest for the RB car, 15.7 from the Frenchman. Lando Norris has just gone quickest of anybody through the first part of the lap. He's 3 tenths of a second up on Fernando Alonso as he goes through the middle sector as well. Feels like Lando Norris guaranteed to displace Alonso at the top at the moment. But he's still got to do that final sector. No mistakes made. Lando Norris round the final corner he comes across the start-finish line and does indeed go half a second quicker. He's into the 114s. It's a 114.890 from Lando Norris. Oscar Piastri can't match his teammate through the first sector. Here comes Carlos Sainz up to 9th fastest. Bortoletto now in 10th. Antonelli in 11th. So just Piastri, Leclerc, Hamilton and Colapinto to come. Here comes Lewis Hamilton across the start-finish line. It's only 9th fastest. Here comes Oscar Piastri. Piastri goes across the start-finish line. And it's second fastest to his teammate, only by 0.05 of a second. It is going to be deliciously tight between those two when it comes to the final part of qualifying, it feels like, as Lewis Hamilton drops into the bottom 5 with Charles Leclerc jumping up. Here comes Franco Colapinto around the final corner. He's the final driver to set a lap time before we can then see. Oh, and it was a mistake from Franco Colapinto. He actually come into the pits and aborted that lap. So Colapinto, no fast lap set. So it is Norris quickest, Piastri second. The two Aston Martins once again in the mix in third and fourth. Isaac Hadjar, Ollie Behrman, George Russell, Max Verstappen, Liam Lawson and Charles Leclerc. Ooh, and there was the mistake from Franco Colapinto at turn 9. And I think actually all 4 wheels were off the racetrack for a moment there. So possibly just deciding to get off. And yeah, lap time deleted for Franco Colapinto, even though he had backed out of that lap completely anyway. Lewis Hamilton, though, is in that bottom 5. I said he was most likely to get in there, but certainly not guaranteed for Lewis Hamilton at this point, nor Charles Leclerc. 10th and 11th fastest, the two Ferrari cars at the moment. It's the Aston Martins that are causing a headache for the big boys. And Charles Leclerc just wants to go out as soon as possible. So they are going to get that car into the garage, swap those tyres around, and back out once again, because Charles Leclerc not very happy with all of the traffic that he had to contend with. And basically a lot of the cars getting in the way of him, as all of the cars have now found their way back into the pits. Alonso is absolutely flying around this track. Didn't Lance Stroll get a podium here I know it was Sebastian Vettel got a podium here. Was that 2021? And then it was taken away from him. So Sebastian Vettel has been on the podium here. Esteban Ocon won that race as well. Yeah. Alonso podium. You just believe. Just have to believe in it and he will achieve. Lance Stroll has come out once again. The Aston Martins are going early with these, but it's working for them. So Lance Stroll deciding to get out on the track and not have to contend with anyone else. Coming around turn 4, Lance Stroll looking very neat and tidy inside of that Aston Martin. Let's say the only car out on track at the moment. How do we feel about this bottom 5? Hamilton, Sainz, Bortoleto, Antonelli, Colapinto. The 5 drivers that now need to improve. Desperate times call for desperate measures. And Lewis Hamilton is going to need something pretty special in this final part of Q2. And then, of course, the big one, the top 10 shootout, the battle for pole position. And it is looking like it is going to be so just competitive between Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. Hamilton on a medium, not that I could see. It was a used set of softs, though. You can see fresh set of softs for a few of those guys. Norris, Piastri went for a fresh set of softs. Alonso, Stroll as well. Hadjar also. But used softs for Russell, Verstappen, Leclerc, Hamilton, Sainz, Bortoleto, Antonelli. So you're expecting those guys that were on used softs to find a little bit of time, but even so, you're testing yourself there by going again. Lance Stroll is out very early indeed. Comes through the first part of the lap, does Lance Stroll. It's a 27.493 from Lance Stroll in the first sector. He's out there all on his own. Just wants to make sure that he gets the lap time in and done and dusted. Maybe they've put a little bit more fuel inside of that Aston Martin car. Might go for another couple of laps or so. You never know. Fernando on third is crazy. Yeah, he's absolutely flying this weekend. As we are now starting to see the cars make a little bit of noise in the pit lane. Ollie Behrman got out first and foremost. Lando Norris there as well. Charles Leclerc said he wanted to get out early, and he's fairly early in the queue. Behrman and Norris just ahead of him. Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, then the 2 Ferraris just behind. Lance Stroll goes third fastest of anybody. He's found 0.3 of a second on his teammate just behind. So Lance Stroll does indeed improve and gets his lap time locked in. Ollie Behrman is just coming through the first sector, still on a warm-up lap though. Lando Norris is following Lance Stroll pretty closely actually, up until they go through turn 3 and up towards turn 4. Lawson and Hadjar. Carlos Sainz is trying his best to jump into the queue, but Oscar Piastri having none of it, and Carlos Sainz is going to have to wait. Also, Franco Colapinto just making his way past the Williams car. So, unfortunately for Carlos Sainz and Gabriel Bortoleto, they've kind of been shunned by the rest of the cars in the pit lane. Bortoleto deciding to get his elbows out a little bit more so, and has managed to jump in front of Oscar Piastri in there as well. So Verstappen is next out. Ollie Behrman is just coming across the start-finish line. So let's see these flying laps then from the final runs of these cars. Behrman then. Lando Norris coming around the final corner too. So let's keep an eye on Lando Norris's first sector time. Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton also we need to keep an eye on, as they are both right at risk. Charles Leclerc going to have a lot of cars in front of him, and he's not very happy about the traffic beforehand. Charles Leclerc, he's going to have probably more traffic, even more so. Piastri is there in front of him, and he's going to have to move out of the way of Leclerc as Piastri. Let's keep Leclerc's first sector time. Lando Norris has come through the first sector at 27.5. Norris and Piastri are on used sets of tyres, though. Leclerc and Hamilton on fresh. 27.4 from Charles Leclerc through the first sector. Lewis Hamilton is also just coming around towards turn 4 to finish up that first part of the lap. And it's a 27.5 from Lewis Hamilton through the first part of the lap. It is going to be tight for them, you know. It is very, very close indeed. Albon is already out. It was a very slow lap from Alex Albon, has to be said. Not enjoying the balance of that Williams at all, unfortunately. Charles Leclerc, though, is the man I've got my eye on. 10th fastest at the moment. Lewis Hamilton, 0.4 of a second up on Charles Leclerc's previous time. They are going to improve. 5th fastest for Charles Leclerc. 1:15.4 from Charles Leclerc, but ahead of Ollie Behrman. And Behrman has already done his lap. So has Lando Norris. Norris, a 1:14.8. Still at the top of the timing sheets. Kimi Antonelli has just come around the first sector, has improved. Liam Lawson goes up to 6th fastest. So Lawson pushing Behrman and Hamilton down. Hamilton only did the 8th fastest time. Isaac Hadjar improves to go 6th fastest. Lewis Hamilton is right on the edge here. Hamilton down in 9th place. Antonelli and Russell now coming around the final sector. Here does come Kimi Antonelli. He goes 8th fastest. That puts Lewis Hamilton right in the drop zone. Here comes George Russell, the man who is now the number 1 at Mercedes, to displace Lewis Hamilton and put him out. He has. George Russell goes 4th fastest, and Lewis Hamilton is going to be out of this qualifying session. Here comes Max Verstappen, goes 8th fastest. He puts Ollie Behrman down into that bottom 5. Gabriel Bortoleto is now coming around the final sector. Bortoleto up into the top 10, drops Kimi Antonelli out. Antonelli is going to be out of qualifying as well. Franco Colapinto is the only driver, I think, left to go. I think Carlos Sainz is done. Oscar Piastri does not improve his lap time. And here comes Franco Colapinto. Oh, no, sorry. Carlos Sainz is coming around the final sector as well. Can Colapinto improve? Does improve, but it's only 14th fastest. Here comes Carlos Sainz. Sainz to ruin Bortoleto's afternoon. Here he comes across the line. And it's not good enough. It's 14th fastest from the Williams. And Bortoleto once again through into the top 10. Lawson, Verstappen, Hadjar also just about made it. It is Andrea Kimi Antonelli in 11th spot for the Mercedes team. Ollie Behrman down in 12th place. Lewis Hamilton down in 13th. Carlos Sainz 14th. And Franco Colapinto in 15th spot. Wow, wow, wow. Again, we lose Antonelli and Hamilton before the final part of qualifying. Hamilton not happy at all. Every time, he says on the radio. Antonelli, Behrman, Hamilton, Sainz, Colapinto, they join Tsunoda, Gasly, Ocon, Hülkenberg and Albon as out of qualifying. They will start. Oh, Kimi Antonelli, lap time deleted. Track limits at turn 14. Kimi Antonelli has had his lap time deleted, and what was bad goes to worse as Antonelli drops down to 15th. Let's have a little look. Ooh. Makes a mistake through turn 1 as well. Antonelli is now 15th. That means Ollie Behrman will start in 11th once again. Ollie Behrman and 11th place are just best friends at this point. It's been 4 11th place finishes for Ollie Behrman in the last 4 Grand Prix. And now he's starting in 11th place for tomorrow's Grand Prix as well. He just absolutely loves 11th place, does the Bear Man. Hamilton then up into 12th spot at least, with Antonelli dropping down into 15th. Sainz and Colapinto also gain a position too in 13th and 14th, but they are still out of qualifying. Antonelli, the worst of the bunch, in 15th spot. Here we go then. Into Q3 we go. It is Lando Norris versus Oscar Piastri for pole position. The two separated by 0.05 of a second in that final part of qualifying that we had. Again, there's going to be 12 minutes on the clock. 2, maybe 3 flying laps if they're really feeling it. Likely to be 2 flying laps from the 2 McLaren cars. They've got 2 fresh set of softs to throw at it as well. Could be very tight indeed. Why yellow flag? Because again, they had to sweep up around turn 12. So turn 12 has a little gravel trap on the outside of it. It's a right-hander as you come into the final part of the lap. And it's a little gravel trap just on the exit on the left-hand side. But it is a gravel trap that is often used by the drivers, you know, because it is there to make the corner more difficult, but it does make the corner quite difficult, and a lot of the drivers do dip their tyres into that gravel trap, and it spreads gravel across that kind of part of the racing track. So once again, they're out there with the brooms to sweep up the gravel off of that final sector before the final 10 drivers go for a run at it. Lance Stroll, George Russell and Fernando Alonso. The Aston Martins, Mercedes powered of course, and the Mercedes car himself in 4th spot. I did think this might be a good weekend for George Russell. The Mercedes car's looking fairly quick, but the Aston Martins in and amongst it as well. Charles Leclerc, sort of where we expect him to be, in and around 5th, 6th place. Charles Leclerc qualified 6th there, has an opportunity to improve upon that. And then it is a little gaggle of Red Bull-powered cars. Isaac Hadjar, the quickest of the bunch. Not often we get to say that with Max Verstappen in the main Red Bull team, but Verstappen just behind him in 8th place, and Liam Lawson, the 3rd fastest Red Bull-powered car this weekend, in 9th. Gabriel Bortoleto once again sneaks that Sauber car into a top 10 starting position, looking for his 3rd points scoring finish for the season and his Formula One career. Just before we go into the summer break, absolutely stunning once again from Gabby. And of course, an opportunity to improve. Might not start in 10th place for tomorrow, but if you were going to gamble on it, I'd likely put Bortoleto down there in 10th spot. As I say, Behrman, Hamilton, Sainz, Colapinto and Antonelli, the 5 that we lost in Q2. Tsunoda, Gasly, Ocon, Hulkenberg and Albon, the 5 drivers that were out in Q1. The final part of qualifying then. Shall we say predictions for pole? Aston Martin 1-2. Love that. Most certainly. Imagine that. An Alonso Stroll front row. Norris and Piastri battling just behind. I think it would make the Hungarian Grand Prix very spicy indeed if we did have an Aston Martin somewhere in the mix with the 2 McLaren cars, because it puts a headache. Because McLaren, you know, even if Piastri is in 2nd spot to Norris, he knows, oh, okay, at least I'll probably finish in 2nd. I'll only lose 7 points, etc., etc. But if there's then a Stroll and Alonso in the mix, or even a George Russell, actually makes the weekend a little bit more of a problem. Investigation. That was from Q1, where Antonelli and Russell both went a little bit longer than they should have on their outlap. They went over the maximum delta time, but honestly, that never really comes with any kind of penalty. There'll be something that they can point to, whether it was some traffic or something else as they were going down the pit lane or whatever it may be, that means they won't get a penalty for that. Antonelli and Colapinto with lap times deleted, though. Antonelli's really making a difference, and Antonelli dropping down to 15th place behind Franco Colapinto as well. Lewis Hamilton not very happy at all, making his way to the Ferrari hospitality and not even taking his helmet off at this point, just hiding his face behind his gloves, really, and Hamilton not really wanting to get involved with the rest of the grid now. Will likely just disappear into that Ferrari garage and not be seen for quite a while, I would imagine. Charles Leclerc is through, though, and it's a nice little mix of teams. We've got a Ferrari, we've got a Stake Sauber, we've got a Red Bull, we've got a Mercedes, then 2 RBs, 2 Alonsos, 2 Aston Martins, and 2 McLaren cars inside of that top 10. So a nice little mixture once again. It is nice when we don't just have, you know, 2 of everything. Oh, and there's the radar. Although there is a touch of rain, sort of nearing the circuit a little bit, does feel like it's not going to come anywhere too close to the Grand Prix track in this final part of qualifying. We should be all good for some dry flying laps. Here we go then. The track is clear. The green light is shown at the pit exit, and the cars are going to make their way onto the track. Here comes Lance Stroll first and foremost. Lance Stroll does like... He's loved getting out early as Lance Stroll in these qualifying sessions. He's out there first once again. Fernando Alonso, his teammate, just behind him. Liam Lawson is going to be out third. Charles Leclerc behind him, fourth across the start-finish line. And here come the 2 cars that we've really got to be keeping an eye on in this final part of qualifying. Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri side by side in the 2 McLaren cars. Here we are then. If I could, just before we get underway with some flying laps, ask you guys to hit the subscribe button, maybe even hit that like button on the stream. That'd be absolutely amazing. If you're watching on Twitch, hit follow as well. We are live on Twitch once again for the 2nd Grand Prix in a row. Really do appreciate you guys coming over and having a little look at the Twitch stream. We're slowly going to try and grow that. But we are almost at 130,000 subscribers on YouTube and almost at 700 followers. I say almost, I think it's like 610. So nearing 700 followers on Twitch. So if you could leave a subscribe, get us close to that 130, leave a follow, get us closer to that 1,000. That'd be absolutely amazing. Here comes Lance Stroll then to get us going this time around. There's the qualifying head-to-head for Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. It is 6-7. Lando Norris with 6, Piastri with 7. Lando Norris will be wanting to even that up this weekend. He is ahead of his teammate on track. Will he be ahead of his teammate going into turn 1 tomorrow? Lance Stroll starting his flying lap. Verstappen has just made his way out of the pits. Here comes Fernando Alonso as well. Lawson and Leclerc will be next too. Let's have a little look at Lance Stroll's first sector time then as he goes through turn 3 and towards turn 4. And Lance Stroll a 27.8 to start us off. Fernando Alonso is going to be next across that timing line. Liam Lawson just coming around turn 2 now. Charles Leclerc as well. But Lando Norris then. DRS open. Foot on the throttle, and he starts his flying lap. Here comes Lando Norris down towards turn 1, and he'll be followed closely by Oscar Piastri, who has just come around the final corner, giving his teammate a little bit of a gap ahead. Lance Stroll outdone by Fernando Alonso in the first sector, so Alonso has the fastest first sector time so far, ahead of Lawson and Leclerc. Lawson has just made his way past Max Verstappen. Verstappen getting out of the way of his old Red Bull teammate for the first 2 races of the season. Lando Norris sets the standard at a 27.5, through the first part of the lap. Piastri can't match it. Piastri 0.03 of a second slower through the first part of the lap. So advantage is with Lando Norris, at least for now. Lando Norris is quicker than Fernando Alonso through the middle part of the lap considerably as well. 4.5 tenths quicker than the Aston Martin. Alonso is still the quickest as Charles Leclerc comes across the line. 6 tenths slower than Fernando. Fernando's put in an absolutely sublime lap there for Aston Martin, it seems. But Lando Norris is outdone by Piastri in the middle part of the lap. Lando Norris now no longer quickest in any sector apart from that final one as he comes across the start-finish line to go quickest of anybody at 15.4. Here comes Oscar Piastri then. What's Piastri looking like? And it's just quicker than its teammate, a 1/10 of a second in it between Piastri and Norris. So advantage Piastri in terms of qualifying here this weekend as we go into the final part of Q3. Bortoleto goes 6th fastest of anybody. Lance Stroll had his lap time deleted. It was a track limits infringement for Lance Stroll. I'll tell you what, though, George Russell almost got that lap together. It was stunning in the first and second sector, lost it all in the final sector. Did George Russell, 0.3 of a second, lost to Oscar Piastri in that final part of the lap, and 2.5 tenths slower overall than George Russell. Fernando Alonso third. Charles Leclerc is just displaced by Max Verstappen in fifth spot. So Verstappen up to fifth, sorry. Charles Leclerc then sixth, Lawson seventh, Bortoletto eighth, Lance Stroll in ninth spot, with that lap time being deleted. And Isaac Hadjar, I don't think we have seen yet. Can't remember seeing Isaac Hadjar out on track. No, I don't think we did. Just having a little look. Where's the mistake from Lance Stroll? Oh, just at turn 9. He's just over the limit, though. If you're over the white line, you're over the right line, and Lance Stroll's lap time deleted. And George Russell has found a bit of pace as well. Very, very tidy indeed from George Russell there. How do we think then? Will Piastri be able to hold on to it? Can Lando Norris find a 1/10 of a second? It is insanely tight between the two of them. Piastri a 15.3, Lando Norris a 15.4, George Russell a 15.6. George Russell maybe not out of the mix either, though. Russell quickest in the first and second parts of the lap, just lost a little bit of downforce maybe, or those tyres fell away from him as he was going through the very short final sector. It's only 3 corners, really, the final sector of the lap. Very gusty, I think, says George Russell. So maybe just a little bit of wind caught him out going through turn 13 or 14. It's starting to look. Oscar Piastri comes in. Fresh tyres for him. And George Russell, though, looking very good indeed. Lance Stroll is out on track once again. Lance Stroll loving being the first man out on track in these sessions. Fernando Alonso following behind him as well. I think the Aston Martin's just running a lot better when there's no traffic in front of them. Maybe just wanting that clean air over the front wing rather than the dirty air of the cars in front. But Lance Stroll needs to set a lap time now. It's been a very, very solid qualifying session from Lance, it has to be said, all the way up until Q3. That little mistake at turn 9 last lap, though, meant that he did not get a full lap time set. Now is his chance. And Max Verstappen already, even on the out lap, feels like I'm driving on ice. So Verstappen still struggling inside of that Red Bull. It's better than some of us were expecting. He is still at least 5th fastest at this point, but still really not happy with the balance of that Red Bull car. Hasn't been throughout the entire weekend, really. Friday was an absolute nightmare for Max Verstappen. And Saturday, not looking like it's going to be a whole lot better, but at least a little bit better from Verstappen, as he has made it through into Q3. Stroll and Alonso then running around. Lance Stroll just coming through the first part of the lap. Let's see what his lap time is like through the first sector. And I'll tell you what, he has improved, and he is quicker than Piastri through that first part of the lap, is Lance Stroll. Only by 0.02 of a second, but 0.02 of a second nonetheless. Lance Stroll quicker than Piastri in that first third of the lap. Here comes Fernando Alonso. Can he outdo his teammates? A 27.577 from Lance Stroll and a 27.533 is purple from Fernando Alonso through the first sector. Charles Leclerc is just coming out of the pits as well with Isaac Hadjar, but the 2 Aston Martin cars are going to be there all over again. And they're going to get their lap times through well before everybody else. Lance Stroll coming around the final corner. There's a good middle sector from Lance Stroll as well, a 26.0, and goes 3rd fastest. Does Lance Stroll. He's only a 1/10 of a second behind Oscar Piastri. It's a stunning weekend for Aston Martin at this moment. Aston Martin seem to have found a completely different level of form for this weekend. Fernando Alonso round the final corner. Here he comes. Oh, 2nd fastest. by less than a tenth of a second. And Fernando Alonso, 0.08 of a second off Oscar Piastri's first lap time. What a lap that is from Fernando Alonso. And it's looking like Aston Martin are truly going to be in the mix tomorrow, possibly for a podium place. Lando Norris looking at a tenth of a second, and now also needs to find at least 100th of a second to get ahead of Fernando Alonso. Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris actually between the two Aston Martin cars at the moment. They're on their out laps though, and Stroll and Alonso on their in laps. And Alonso even said himself that was a good lap. He knew. Just had a feeling, did Fernando Alonso. He'll have seen that delta time come up on his steering wheel and gone, that I'll be pretty happy about. Alonso shows that he's still got it. Even though he missed free practice 1 as well, Fernando Alonso. Missed it with an injury to his back that he sustained in Spa. Decided to sit out of free practice 1. Lance Stroll comes into the pits. An afternoon's work done for him. And now we have to wait and see how the rest of the field line up. Charles Leclerc has improved through the first part of the lap. Isaac Hadjar is out for the first time as well. Lando Norris goes down towards turn 1. Let's watch the onboard then. Norris versus Piastri is the real headline of the session, isn't it? Piastri's also started his flying lap as well. Lando Norris just coming around turn 3 on my screen and on the delta times now. Let's see what it's like through the first sector. It's a little bit slower than Piastri. It's 0.07 of a second, so more than capable of making that up is Lando Norris. But it's whether or not Piastri can improve. Piastri doesn't. Piastri's actually slower than Norris through the first sector then. Piastri also slower than his previous time as well, as Charles Leclerc has just gone quickest of anybody out of nowhere. I completely missed that. I was looking at the two McLaren lap times. Charles Leclerc has just gone to the top spot. Lando Norris is 0.2 of a second down on Charles Leclerc through the middle part of the lap, by the way. Leclerc, stunning middle sector for the Ferrari. Absolutely came out of nowhere. And Charles Leclerc suddenly looks like he is number 1 at the moment. Norris is going to come across the start-finish line. It's only 3rd fastest for Lando Norris. Does not improve on his teammate's time, even with a purple final sector. Can Piastri nab pole position, or has Charles Leclerc come to ruin McLaren's afternoon? He has! Piastri can't do it. Piastri is only 2nd fastest. It's Charles Leclerc with an absolutely stunning lap inside of the Ferrari, who is going to start from pole position. Max Verstappen in 9th place now, coming around the middle sector, struggling with that for Red Bull powered car. I'm all over the place. Alonso 4th fastest now. Stroll down to 5th. Russell couldn't improve. Russell's still on a flying lap, sorry. Russell's just coming around the final corner. I thought he'd already gone. He hasn't. Here comes George Russell to go quicker than the Aston Martins. He puts himself 4th fastest. Does George Russell. Here comes Max Verstappen. Currently 10th fastest. Only jumps up to 8th. He's quicker than the 2 Red Bull powered cars. But I'll tell you who he's not quicker than. Gabriel Bortoleto starts in 7th place. What an end to qualifying that was. That just completely snuck up on me. Charles Leclerc didn't even look at his lap times. Was really honed in on Piastri versus Norris. And Leclerc, out of nowhere, a 1:15.3, 0.02 of a second quicker than Oscar Piastri, and he starts on top spot for tomorrow. So that is the driver who's going to be in the mix. Charles Leclerc take a bow. Oscar Piastri will start just beside him on the 2nd spot. 2nd row of the grid is Lando Norris and George Russell, the 2 Britons fighting it out for the final podium place. Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll lock out the 3rd row of the grid for Aston Martin. And what a starting position they've got for tomorrow's Grand Prix. Gabriel Bortoleto is in 7th place. The Brazilian starting ahead of the 4-time world champion Max Verstappen. And then it is an all RB affair on the 5th row of the grid and just inside the point scoring positions as Lawson and Hadjar start in 9th and 10th after that final session. What an end to qualifying that was. Charles Leclerc out of nowhere Behrman and Hamilton will start side by side in 11th and 12th. Sainz and Colapinto at 13th and 14th. Antonelli was the final driver to drop out of Q2. He'll start in 15th place. Tsunoda, the first driver to drop out in Q1. He was 16th fastest, was Yuki Tsunoda. 17th for Pierre Gasly. 18th for Esteban Ocon, the old Alpine teammates side by side on the penultimate row of the grid. And then Nico Hülkenberg and Alex Albon right at the back of the pack. Wow, what a qualifying that was. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll be live once again tomorrow for the Grand Prix. The Hungarian Grand Prix is just ahead of us. 70 laps Charles Leclerc has got to hold off the two McLaren cars from pole position. It's going to be a hell of an afternoon if he's able to do it. Then, of course, we will be live after the fact for all of the members. So if you are a channel member, make sure that you stick around after the Grand Prix tomorrow. We do a members-only post-race show, which is very, very fun indeed, and lovely little opportunity to have a chat. But as I said, I'm going to disappear now. Thank you guys so much for watching. Leave likes, subscribe, all of that good stuff. If you're here for Twitch, hit the follow button as well. Even if you're watching on YouTube, just maybe click that link in the description down below. Follow over on YouTube as well. And if you could do me a favor, if you want to, you know, maybe you could just hit one of the links in the description down below for one of the videos as well. Watch a video, maybe just run that in the background while you're doing something else. That'd be very, very appreciated. Thank you guys so much. I will see you tomorrow.